This evening's Dharma talk was suggested by Freedom Mountain, otherwise known as Chuck. Sokzuan. Pretty much talk about anything, even though I'm always kind of puzzled about what I should talk about. So it was great help. You want to continue to help me? Okay, I'll call on you. So the idea there, the Earth is flat. It's just something that was said for thousands of years, and then somebody discovered it wasn't flat; it was bumpy. And but I like to say, I often say, is the Earth flat or round? Of course, everybody's going to say it's round. Well, there's a few people on YouTube that argue that, and they have something going there, which you did, but if it was flat, you could walk in a circle and think it was round. So is that what's happening? Is that what? How do they know it's round? I mean, even from space, it looks round, but it might be just a flat disk. It keeps changing every time you look away. It could be. So what am I saying here? I'm saying the reason I accepted that as a talk title is because we tend to grasp on to the concept of something. Oh, and now I know, and then we stop examining, we stop looking at it. So any kind of a interpretation that we have of anything tends to, and it's not that it isn't relatively accurate, but dependently arisen, if we look at the complete picture, you may not feel quite as safe in your opinion, your ideas, your conclusions, your concepts, and so on. One tit for tat kind of situation, like this person committed a crime, therefore they need to be punished or locked up. And, this is the easiest way to do it. And if you look really close, I think, isn't that a legal term or something? Well, probably not. It's probably just somebody who doesn't want to be blamed. And but if you look at any situation, you'll see that it's much deeper than just what happened. The courts in our country don't want to deal with that because it's too complicated. It would take forever. So somebody is maybe relatively to blame. This person did that, or you can do it a little bit, but if you go too far with it, then you actually shut out, all of the causes and conditions that had to arise for that simple this caused that situation to even occur. So that's quite often what we do. We just take just a surface understanding, and if this person did something harmful to this person, then our laws say this person needs to be punished. Interesting that we don't say this person has be good if we help them. No, we want to retaliate. We want blood. And we don't really realize. And I'm not accusing you of anything, nor am I predicting any future event. But you're going to be on the other side of that. You're always on the other side of everything. That's why the Earth is flat. You're always on. Yes?
What do you mean by the other side of things?
What?
You're going to be on the other side of things. Like, eye for an eye, we both lose our sight. So, if you're interacting with somebody and you don't retaliate, what did you mean by being on the other side of things?
A victim and perpetrator. Eventually you'll be, if you're a perpetrator, eventually you'll be a victim. There's no way to get out of it. I don't care what a wonderful angelic person you are, because you're a part of dependent origination. It's a basic teaching of the Buddha. I'm not making it up. I've of separate so-called discrete events. You can't find one thing that causes something else. For some event that happened, this one person was in there. He was went in there when he was 17 because his mother and his father, causes and conditions, were both addicts and both pretty much useless when it came to being parents. Who knows what happened to them to cause them to be in that situation? But this person needed to have a family, and they found a gang. That was their family. And when the gang went to rob a store, rob someplace, somebody got killed. He was there. He didn't kill them, but he was there. So and I think in that situation, the person who did the killing got away. And so he when I met him, he was in his 40s and been in prison for quite, several decades, and been trying to get parole. And this is years ago. I don't know if he ever got out or not. But if you were to meet this fellow, you'd probably scratch your head a little bit trying to find out where's the evil, terrible person that needed to spend several dozen years in prison because of something happened when they were 17 that had, as I said before, some kind of extenuating circumstances. Therefore, the earth is flat. You follow me? It's just we come to a conclusion about it. Earth is round, earth is flat. Both of those are lies. That's relative truth that is grasped onto is always untrue. Now, relative truth that is allowed to breathe, then you might see both sides of that polarity. You might have a sense of maybe humanity, or maybe even compassion might arise for someone who is in a desperate situation. I often say, ignorance closely, without making any excuses for yourself, without blaming your parents, without blaming your society, without blaming yourself, but just look at that, sit down, look at the wall until you see that. Then there's a good chance that when you do run into a situation where someone is mistreating you, instead of seeing their mistreatment as a threat or warfare, you might see that the reason they're even doing that is because they're suffering so much. And the only way they can get rid of that anxiety, that pain, that suffering is to throw it onto you, sometimes with a gun, sometimes with a club, sometimes with their fist, sometimes with their sarcasm, sometimes with their dirty looks, sometimes by taking away your wallet. I mean, seeing deeply into something. Anytime anything is occurring, it is not just that event. It has a labyrinth that goes every which direction. And the further you look, the more distant everything gets. But it's very necessary for that one simple cause at the end of that line of activity to be there for the entire event to come together. Just like anyone who's born here, your mother and your father had to come together at a particular time in a particular place for you. It might be somebody here, but it wouldn't be you. And there's a good likelihood you wouldn't be here. You'd be somewhere else. When I say you, I'm saying that's negligible, whether there is a you that can be somewhere else. Find out. If you take it for granted, then Earth is flat. Well, Earth is flat. So how did they come out with the Earth being round? Is it round? Does anybody know for a fact? Can you prove that the Earth is round? Can you prove that you have thoughts? Does everyone here have thoughts? Say, yeah.
Not really.
Huh?
No,
You liar.
Where do thoughts come from?
Huh?
Where do thoughts even come from?
Good point. Find out. I can help you. First, find out what they are and see if their beingness actually has a source. Just awareness. But not investigating that causes us to get wound up in our negativity, so that we can't see the negativity and see that it's quite often our reaction to things is about protecting ourselves from something that is probably inevitable. Or I've said enough. Earth is flat. Anything else? Susan.
How can we investigate without concluding?
See that you conclude. If you're looking at anything and you have a conclusion, that's what it looks like. And if you watch the conclusion, you'll see that prevents any further exploration. But what if Ponce de Leon had concluded that when he hit the Canary Islands that was Florida? You know about that, right? Then he would never have found the Fountain of Youth. So if you conclude, it's not that it's not correct. It's not that fire is hot. Conclusion. The water is wet. Earth is hard. Wind moves. It's not that there aren't conclusions that show up. But to do that just because you don't like not knowing, which is what the ego's method of operation is. If it doesn't know something, it'll make up something, because it does not like to be in open space without a reference point. And why? Because the ego is unreal. It's a paranoid insurance policy, according to my teacher. It's an aspect of consciousness that doesn't want to be found out that there isn't anyone there. The interesting thing about this, if you find out there isn't anyone there, then your paranoia starts to reduce by quite a bit.
Seems to be just a really familiar sentence or question type, like how do we do this without that? And often, like you did with Sokzuan, you'll say, see that you do. So like if I said, how do I investigate without concluding, you said, see that you conclude. Is that the way that we can get to not concluding?
Sure. If you have a negativity, whether it's it could be something like just a low-level depression that keeps kind of haunting you. If you try to cover that up, which you can do, people will sell you all kinds of stuff to cover that, both legal and illegal. And some of it works and some of it doesn't. Some of it works for a little while, some of it works for a long time. Some of it has side effects, some of it doesn't. Some of it, the situation itself is a side effect. Sometimes there's no side for the effect, but the effect is there anyway. But even further confusing, because you can see how difficult that would be to deal with intellectually. Well, except for you, maybe. You probably could figure it out. What's your question? I'm the one with a bad memory. What is it?
Would you like me to repeat it or ask it in another way?
Let me think about it. I don't care. Just ask me.
Where the question was coming out of, I guess I hadn't considered that was a way for us to that we could not conclude by watching it. We conclude. It almost felt like it was like the fact that we were asking that question was like looking in the wrong area.
No, you see that the tendency is to jump to conclusions. Is a common phrase, but even crawl to conclusions is still confusing. You don't have to jump. It's just to think that whatever is showing up, as soon as you conclude anything about it, you actually stop investigating and you start enjoying the comfort and security of your conclusion. Sometimes called an opinion if it gets goes on for an indefinite length of time. Some people live in their opinions so strongly they don't live there. They miss their life. I'm not saying they don't have breakfast or do the laundry, but I'm saying they miss the incredible adventure we call life, incredible openness we call life, the incredible unknown of just walking down any street.
Did we learn to enjoy the open space?
No. But you want to know more? Go ahead.
What do we, how does that relationship develop with the open space?
We stop separating ourselves from space out of paranoia, out of fear. Like too much space. So the ego word for that is not knowing what's going to happen next. Anxiety, paranoia. If you buy into that, it's not going to be easy. I'm not saying you can't reduce it somewhat by relating to the anxiety as something you need to avoid or get away from or find some way, some modality to stay away from it. But if you come into this room and you listen to this old man, I'm going to, at some point, maybe not right away, but rub your nose in it with your permission. And how do I do that? I say, face the wall. I don't have to do anything else because you're already looking at your own, what is that word? Your own, help me here. You're already looking at your own, huh?
Neurosis.
Yeah. I was thinking of that other word, but I'm not going to use that because I'm on howdy doody time. But we look at that, and then through the sitting practice of meditation, through you could say stretching our awareness to just observe, we see the way we conclude, and by continuing to watch the conclusion, that concluding energy starts to wear out. It gets its energy from caving into fear, and by sitting still, holding still, watching what moves, eventually we become, I have to say it this way, fearless. It's not that the fear goes away. We're just not going to react to that anymore. We want the truth more than we want safety. It's called, a teacher some time back called it the wisdom of insecurity. I think it was probably Pema Chodron quoting somebody. Wisdom of feeling insecure is the doorway to the wisdom, because wisdom is doesn't see anything but wisdom. It doesn't see enemies. It doesn't even see friends. It doesn't need friends. It doesn't need enemies. It doesn't need anything, because why? The ultimate expression of that is it's not separate from anything. It doesn't mean it's all smushed together. You have one big ball of gunk called wisdom. It means that the incredible separation that everything has is appreciated, and when that energy is flowing smoothly, the only word for it is love. But it's not craving, it's not lust, it's not attachment, it's not demand on anything to do as I say or you don't love me. It's just a complete expression. It's happening all the time. Most people, because they're afraid of their lives, they miss it. They shut down with their ideas, their opinions, their judgments, and their beliefs. If you're listening to me, you could give your mind the benefit of the doubt and just watch what moves. Just like watching, if you're watching a carpet, you could watch carpet beetles.
Along the lines of the conclusions wear themselves out.
Yes, I did.
Um,
How did that happen?
no.
I'm glad I didn't have to answer that. All right.
It just seems like I look for proof of that happening. So if it does wear itself out,
You just avoided. By looking for proof, you've stopped examining. As soon as you look for proof of anything, this is not, it's not 10th grade chemistry. It's a different, it's a similar dynamic, and those metaphors work somewhat, but the fundamental situation is you need to look at the very thing that you're trying to understand, which is the confusion, or is the coming to conclusions, or is the avoidance or ignorance of fundamental truth. Yes, sir.
would we notice if conclusions wore themselves out?
Yes.
And is that ceasing to invest? Would that cease to investigate?
Well, if you've already investigated, then you don't have to continue. Keep coming. That package isn't unwrapped yet.
Well, you said that.
Be careful now. I'm not accusing you of anything.
There's that thing you say where, yeah,
Uh-oh, here it
once you're on
goes.
the path, best finish.
Yes.
And you've said to just keep practicing for the rest of your life.
Yes, I have.
So how could there? It just seems like that contradicts what you just said.
That's the finish. There isn't anything to finish. Trungpa Rinpoche has a title of a book. It's also a phrase I've heard him use: "A journey without goal." As long as there's a living being, there's a journey. Without goal, there's no goal. But the illusion is that there is a goal. It's not that you might clear up some of your neurosis and possibly help others by not making life miserable for them, or meddling with other people's karma based on your idea of what should happen, what shouldn't happen, including your own. Don't miss your life by covering up aspects of your life you think shouldn't be there, or think you don't deserve. Not just you, but anybody. Yes. Ran out of steam. Steamboat Willie. Yes.
So how much further do we have to go before we unwrap the package?
How much further?
Okay.
Might never get unwrapped, but we still have to do it. We still have to look and see, what is this? Fundamentally, what is this? Rather than buying into the earth is flat. Well, the earth is flat, a few hundred years ago. And now the earth is round, another opinion. So I'm not saying we should disbelieve that or believe it, just don't do anything with it. It's so easy just to latch onto something that people say. We see it in this particular period of so-called history. We see people intensely going after global warming, and other people intensely going after that's a hoax, or intensely. It's you might want to spend some time on the cushion looking at your own mind before you go out and join one of these clubs. Not that there isn't one that may be relatively correct and one's relatively wrong, but anytime you have warfare, anytime you have any kind of tension between the communication goes down the tubes, and the cooperation is non-existent, and the collaboration is just a foreign word. So it's about start with your own mind, work with your own mind. If this, as I've said before, if you have unexamined aggression under your rib cage somewhere, or in the back, in in your mind, and it's not been examined, it's not been liberated, and it's hidden out, then you may think you're doing fine, but if you get into an area where there's a certain kind of frequency where other people have a certain kind of aggression that resonates with that aggression, your aggression can come rising to the fore. A mountain out of a molehill kind of thing. You didn't notice anything, and suddenly you're extremely upset and mad about something somebody said, and all they said was something that maybe they didn't even intend to offend you, but they did, and you're in a rage. If you don't examine that and settle your own warfare, then you'll project your warfare onto the world, and then you'll think it's on the world, and you go to war with it. You'll fight the very warfare that you just projected in front of you. Very simple and very difficult to see or understand, or to bring to a halt.
Is there fruition to investigation?
There's fruition, but it's not in the form that we might think. It's you might not say, that's over with, but that's over with. Finally, there's fruition there. You might not say that, but there is a fruition. But it's where everything that seems separate is no longer. There's nothing to conclude because there isn't anything separate. So one actually sees with one's own heart mind that everywhere you look, you don't see anything but yourself. You're not your ego self, but you don't see any. Another way of saying it, you don't see anything that's other. The third turning teachings of the Buddha is empty of other. It's empty of anything else of other, which is a way of talking about. Yes.
Does that quality of investigation still exist? Is it an assumption that there's something to find that leads to that investigation?
The investigation can continue and can show up differently for different people, depending on how that shows up. And if a person has received the vows that we observe in this particular lineage, then that investigation is very low level, but is still there in terms of helping others. You investigate just enough to see if you can help someone, but you don't step across the line and intercept their karma, or tell them they should do this or do that, or clean up their act, or everything. Even somebody who's doing something that, generally speaking, would not be thought of as very healthy. You mind your own business. This is their karma. This doesn't mean that if you see someone getting ready to kill somebody else or harm, beat up a child or a dog or something like that, as I've said before, you step in, you stop them. You don't need to think, you don't need my help. Step into it. But you don't do it out of some kind of, now let's see, would Sokzuan think that was meddling for me to stop that person from murdering him? I'm being silly here, but I'm just saying you would know. You just know what to do. In any kind of emergency, we know what to do. We just know. You don't, as the other example, if a child is running out in front of a car, you don't check with their mom and dad to see if it's okay to stop them. You grab them before they get in front of that car. Let me go over here to Michael first.
If it seems like the desire for something else is trumping the desire to see the truth, how can we work with that in our everyday practice?
I think just that, what you say in their everyday practice, is just to continue to practice. It might take a lot of sitting down, holding still, looking at a wall, and just being bored to death before that awareness starts to penetrate into deeper layers of what is commonly called, or traditionally called, ignorance. The interesting thing about ignorance is you don't know what you're ignoring. The very nature of shutting down is blind. Whereas the other two poisons of grasping or craving or demanding or lust or whatever you want to say that wants something is pretty obvious. And aggression, which wants to stop something, kill something, hurt something, end something, pretty obvious. But ignorance is just, what problem? It's just gone away. Or I think it's time to go for a walk. Distraction is the sneakiest form of ignorance. You can see that if you're having a conversation with someone. It's interesting if you're present and you're talking to someone, and you can just about see it in their eyes when they just have stopped listening to you. And their eyes kind of, as it's said, glaze over. Or they might be asking you a question about something, you answer, and you wait to see if they're going to have any more interest in how to go skydiving. And then they just say, what time is it? Or they say, you want a hot dog? They change the subject. Probably not hot dog. Probably want a veggie burger. Yes.
Seems like it shows up as distraction on the cushion,
Yes.
like just shifting around a little bit.
Yes.
Even if it just is it necessary to hold still through those urges?
If you can, without hold still, without being rigid. If it gets starts to get a little bit intense, get up and walk around. Go for a walk. It's not a prison. This is not a military. I've been there. This is not it. So get up. Even if you've been sitting for 15 minutes and you feel distressed in some way, don't sit there and push your way through it. I mean, go out, look out the window, go smoke a cigarette. No, don't do that. Take a little bit of a break, but then come right back in and sit back down, and then look at the contrast. See if anything had changed by you providing a contrast by leaving, and come back and see, did that come back exactly with the same number of ripples in it? Or is that particular emotional dynamic have a different shape, a different texture? So it's always about awareness, never about a conclusion. It's about the awareness, and the awareness may show up in terms of texture or speed or frequency or rhythm, all kinds of things, words that can be used that seem to show up in music and art and all of those things. Yes.
So if we have, if I have a thought like this is getting me nowhere, and I stand up and just do something else, am I believing that thought?
Maybe, but it's not about stopping belief. And when I say don't believe your thoughts, I know you can't help believe your thoughts. I believe my thoughts. That's how I know about it. But if you look at the way you believe thoughts, it doesn't have exactly the same hold on you as believing thoughts and with no investigation at all. Whereas if you look at the thoughts and you say, "Is that true?" You can actually question, "Is that what I'm feeling, believing, smelling, tasting, hearing, touching? Is that true? Is the earth flat?" And you can use that kind of real, almost brittle, stark contrast. Is the earth flat? Is this true? What I'm feeling? The interesting thing about anything that seems to be relatively true is it doesn't last. Have you noticed how you can be really, really just blazing mad one minute, ready to, break the law, and then it's gone. And it's almost like the ego mind doesn't like that, because it's kind of it's upsetting to the ego to not be able to hang on to angry feelings of resentment when somebody actually did something. So then we try to do what? Zombie thoughts. We try to resurrect our feelings. We'll squish around and say, "They shouldn't have done that." And we'll talk to our friends. "You know what they did? And they said this. And what do you think about that?" "Oh, I think that's terrible. You shouldn't put up with that." Bingo. You got somebody on your side helping you resurrect the zombie thoughts so that you can continue your rage against somebody who probably didn't even intend to hurt you in the first place.
Is there a difference in quality? Like, let's say a thought came up like, "This is getting me nowhere," and I sit through it as opposed to getting up. Is there a difference in quality?
I think it's a good question, but I think it would be very, very individual. I think with each person, could be. I understand your question, but I think it would be different, not only with each person, but with each time that you did that, there would be something changing all the time, because nothing is particularly static. More? Was it?
You brought up like how in an emergency we just know what to do.
Yes.
Can we relate to everything that way?
Yeah, everything's an emergency.
How do we see that?
See that it's not an emergency?
It just seems like a lot of contrast, like the kid running in the road. That doesn't happen
Yeah.
every day. So
that shock or that fear kind of triggers our understanding on a deep level that is not necessarily about thinking. It's just a fundamental understanding of cars kill people. That child cannot live. So we see everything all at once. It's instant. There's no aberration. There's no thought process. There's no analysis. We just function. You can do that without there being an emergency. You can just function. But if you think you're separate and you think you can win or lose, live or die, if you think all those polarities are true, Earth is flat, Earth is round, if you think those, that's still a debate there, then we get caught on one side or the other, and we just get taken into that situation because the ego mind, self-centered mind, feels safer there. it's hard to live in an open dimension of being. An open dimension is so open that the only way I know that I teach is because I'm here. Time to teach. If you all left, I wouldn't try to figure out how to round you up. I'd go home. And I'm serious, I would do that. I might say, where did those people go that used to come here? When you would say, don't worry about it, be all right. Go ahead.
So when you talk about living in that open dimension,
Yes.
Is it not a constant state of emergency where we just know what to do?
Well, it's the word emergency comes from something that emerges. It emerges. So everything is always emerging and emerging and emerging. So it's a different kind of emergency. It's an emergency without contrast. So it's everything is emerging. So it's pretty hard to terrify you. Really pretty hard to surprise you. I'm not saying you couldn't come up behind me or anybody else and say boo and scare them or startle them, but nothing's going to particularly shock you, because there's the only thing way you can be shocked is if you're closed down and you've retreated into your cocoon or your little shell of privacy. More? Did you?
Question from Oscar.
Oscar.
How do we know that no separate self is not a conclusion?
It could be a conclusion if you think you have somehow eliminated that there was a separate self, but now I no longer have a separate self. The way you know that it's not a conclusion is you don't conclude. It's not something you conclude. You just see that there isn't anything there. And if so there's no conclusion, you don't actually go into, well, there's nothing there, so I'll no longer look there. You see it constantly. You see no self, no self, no self, no self. Everywhere you look, you see no self. You see no other. Not only nothing here, but nothing out there. It's called freedom. And it's available to everybody. You don't have to be locked up in the prison of your mind, your opinions, your ideas, your judgments, your beliefs. You don't have to have a position on anything. You can function quite well without positions or beliefs. More?
So maybe 2 parts. What do you mean, or what is your definition to polarity?
Polarity? One thing that looks like two. Just a way of saying it. Polarity is, you can't have one thing without its opposite. The very nature of relative truth is night and day, light and dark, up and down, back and forth, this way and that way, plus and minus, life and death, Buddhas and sentient beings. A very, very interesting one is pain and pleasure, because pain is just the abrasion of the nerve endings, whichever sense field you're in. It's, somehow that sensitive area gets abraded or roughed up by something, no matter what sense field that's in. So, but also if it's the other way, if it's soothing, same sense, the same ears that hear something that's out of tune, like, have you ever heard of? Well, I can't mention Rumi because he's pretty much in tune, but somebody who was really young play a violin would not be too comfortable. A violin's a very, very sensitive instrument. It has to be stroked. So a beautiful sound and a terrible sound. And even though it's not exactly the same as having a railroad spike drug across your backbone, so that would be one feeling, a nerve ending, and the other one would be a feather or something, which might take a little bit or actually feel good. And, they're simple metaphors, but it's like that. It's like really tasty food and really horrible food. Sometimes we like sour food. It's not exactly pleasurable, but it's kind of exciting. It's a culinary. What do they call that? What culinary? No, there's a name for that. I can't think of what it's called. And I don't have any chefs here to ask. Or do I?
It could be music philosophy,
Pardon me?
like comparable music philosophy after music got darker after World War II. Every day is like more relevant to the premise of life.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's the same thing with the arts. If you look at the art that was produced around World War I, the German expressionist painters that day were Franz Marc or other German expressionist painters. It was pretty dark. Lots of bright colors, but they were done in a way that was dark. George Grosz was another one. And then in World War II, that very similar kind of thing. But with music also. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there's a couple different things that have come to me. The two generalizations that have come full circle with me a couple times is beliefs are going to be a mind killer, and then you're not going to escape karma. It's kind of like, it seems to just pop back in my head as we keep talking about this.
So do you have a question?
No, it's just fascinating to me because polarity is kind of something I've stepped into with metaphors lately, because that was introduced to me through electricity. So like, if you have the feather on one end and you have the rougher response on the other end, that's kind of karma.
Polarized. And this path is about being confused and suffering and being afraid of death and afraid of anything, and then liberation. So it's not a theistic path. It isn't about a higher being that knows everything and we're worshiping, but it's about a human being who discovered something about the nature of being alive and shared it with others, and it's come down to us through 2,500 years. Nothing to believe. I don't believe in anything particularly. Even Buddhism, I don't believe in this. If I believed in it, I couldn't teach it, because the Buddha didn't necessarily believe what he was saying. Yes.
William Murray has a question.
Yes, William.
He asks, is observation the same as investigation?
Yes. Same thing. If the observation is just very much about give it your attention, and then whatever moves, receive it. So no addition, subtraction, no cover-ups. If there's any cover-ups, they'll come with the territory, and it'll reveal itself. You don't have to dig. That's what he's asking me.
Question from Sanho in Oklahoma. What does it look like to act without opinion or position?
Well, as far as what it looks like, it depends on who's doing the looking. If someone is doing that doesn't have a deep understanding of how that works, it could be terrifying. You might find yourself in a situation where you don't have time to, what do they call that? Get it together. Then you might find that you have to act out of that emergency or that the immediacy of the situation. You have to do something. You don't have time to think about it. So it may feel like that, or it may look like that. But to one who deeply understands what this is, then that person may not act very much. And when they do act, it would come out of seeing the whole picture, the big picture, seeing everything, and not particularly acting out of self-interest, up to and including protecting yourself or making sure that people like you. We have a few minutes if there's any more questions. Yes.
Earlier you were talking about unexamined aggression here gets projected out.
Yes.
Is any anger or aggression outwards evidence of some sort of internal warfare?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. You could see something happening in front of you because you're there, you have eyes, you're seeing, you're a human being, and there are 2 people, 3 people, 8 people doing something that's very harmful to someone else, or creating difficulty. And it may not resonate with any kind of unexamined anger, but you may just see the situation and get pissed off. It's called anger without hatred. So you might go and grab them by the scruff of the neck if they had one and stop them. But you wouldn't think that they're horrible people necessarily. They're probably suffering. So the way people conventionally get out of their suffering is to dump it on somebody else. It's called blame, or it's called warfare, or it's called punishment. Blame somebody else. Our whole society is somebody does something wrong, blame, or then we find out why they did it and we blame them. It's blame and blame and blame. No one, I won't say no one, but rarely does anyone sit down and fundamentally try to help someone who is who has become so miserable that they've taken their anger, their hatred out on others. Rare to find that. And sometimes the people who are doing that don't want your help. You get too close to them, they'll put your head on the chopping block. More about that. Susan.
If we see blame showing up in ourselves, how do we relate to that?
Just observe it. Don't get rid of it. Don't justify it. Do no math at all. Don't add. Just notice that, whether it's blaming yourself or blaming others. Because if you do anything too quickly to try to remove it so you don't blame, then because you can't get rid of it. The very nature of dependent origination is that you can't remove something. It's like you have a big puzzle and you want to pull one piece out because you don't like it, or somebody took a bite out of it. So don't interfere with the structure, but be very aware of it. More.
I feel this desire to like take responsibility for it or something instead. Is that meddling?
No, you could be responsible. The ability to respond doesn't mean blame. It just means that you have the ability that when you see something happening, you can look at it, you can observe it, you can witness it, or you can receive its negativity, you can receive its positivity. You can just receive it. As I've said before, give everything your attention, and whatever moves, whatever way. If it moves away, say goodbye, or don't say anything. If it moves off to one side, just observe. If it moves towards you, let it come. Even if it seems threatening, if you can, let it come forward.
Is receiving the response then?
Yeah. The ability to respond. You're responding to it going away by not disagreeing. You're responding to it coming towards you by not disagreeing and nor agreeing. Give it no feedback. You don't need to produce, as I sometimes use, reception production. Receiving seems for someone who's trying to train their mind to be less crazy, more sane. Receiving seems to be the important thing, so you can see more clearly how you function in the world. Producing, in other words, ideas, opinions, judgments, evaluations, anything, even if it's relatively true, even if the earth is flat, it's still a production. The earth is round, the earth is flat. They're just productions. It's like the Buddha's, the first words out of his mouth, as far as we know, one of the things he said is life is suffering. He didn't say part-time. And he was not a nihilist. He was a realist. Yes.
How would you describe the difference between anger and hatred?
So it could be very similar, but anger without hatred. Hatred is actually thinking something needs to be stopped or annihilated or done away with or changed or ripped up or chained or controlled. And anger is just part of being a human being. If you're in this body form, you're going to have nerve-ending pain. You're going to have relationship difficulty. Things are going this way and going that way, and you're you're trying to fix the wheel on your ox cart, or fix a wheel on your 2003 Buick. You still have LeSabres? Probably not. But you're trying to you get angry with it. You get irritated or frustrated. That's not a problem. If you think you have to live up to some kind of ideal of someone who doesn't have any emotions anymore, this is a misunderstanding. Sometimes if you're a meditator, you've been meditating, especially for years, especially if you're a monk and someone sees you get angry at something, they say, I thought you meditated. I thought you were so peaceful. And here you all are angry, spitting and sputtering. And they just love to kind of look at you and gotcha, getting mad. Did that happen? Yeah. You ever seen me mad?
Do you hate me?
Huh?
Do you hate me?
I love you. Always. I only get mad at people I love. Any further questions?
You say just receive and just observe.
Yes.
What's the difference between observe and receive?
So if you're observing, if you're just giving everything your attention, you're observing whatever's happening in your mind or in the world or outside, or the birds are chirping and people walking down the hallway or banging on the door, and you're just you're observing things that are happening in your mind about, oh, I need to pay that bill. I only have one more day. Little kinds of subconscious gossip that's going on back and forth. Everybody does it. I do it. So not something to get rid of. It's just observe that. And that by observing that, you're training your mind to meet everything as it is, as simple as possible, without a bunch of, excuse me, without a bunch of Post-it notes all over it that make it impossible to decipher what the hell's even going on. You don't need Post-it notes. No comment. Whatever's happening, no comment. If you need to comment on it, you won't be able to help it at some point. What was the other part of the question?
What's the difference between observing and receiving?
So if you're observing, you can't really receive unless you are observing. So if you're observing whatever is happening, then whatever is moving your way, observe that it's you're receiving it. It's just you're not objecting to it with your ideas, opinions, solid steel Post-it notes. You've seen those, they're made of metal, and they have a whole bunch of glue on the top, and you can stick them on somebody so they can't get to you. You can write on it, no. You can't come in my house. You haven't seen those? Further question? Steve?
Do you have any thoughts on subconscious projection?
Yeah, most projections are tied up with a lower level of awareness where there's no actual there's consciousness there, but there's no awareness there about it. In our tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, the Yogacara tradition, is it's called the Alaya Vijnana, or it's a storehouse consciousness. And so something happens here, we hear a sound, and that area is triggered. So if it's not been examined, if we're not clear about what's in that area, then those little gremlins can come climbing right up the walls of the thing, and they enter your life, and next thing you know, you have a living room full of monsters. I mean, possibly just a metaphor. But if you see it, if you know what this is, nothing can startle you. I'm not saying you can't be startled, but I'm saying nothing surprises you. No one's can come to you with terrible neurosis, and you're not startled by it, no matter how bad it is, because you see what this is. You've seen it here, so you know who this is, and there's nothing here that's going to. If there's nothing here, there's not going to be anything out there. I could give you some examples, but I have to. They come and get me.
I'm sure I can crack a few of them, but I'm just kind of like, I think of one in my life. If you don't have a certain circumstance where you're talking to another individual and it's been pulled into the spotlight to them, and they pulled in the spotlight for you, if you never have a blessing, you could potentially go your whole life projecting subconscious projections.
You could. This is what we talk about karma, the causes and conditions that bring us into this is an unusual place here. We've got a brick building in the middle of nowhere, which is basically Michigan. It's somewhere, but it's Michigan. And, there's not much, you might go to California and find meditation groups and Zen temples and so on, but I don't think there isn't. There's a few groups here in Michigan. So this is a really unusual place. And what is the reason for having this here? So somebody can come here and live and spend a strong or major part of their life studying their mind, not to believe in Buddhism. I don't believe this. I don't believe in Buddhism. I practice it. I practice what the Buddha taught as near as I can tell through the help of my teachers. There's nothing to believe in. It's not a belief system. Therefore, it is it is a spiritual path, and it is a religion in that it's practiced religiously, but it's not a conventional form that we see. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not making those wrong. Some people need that kind of a structure, and they should do that. So I'm not looking for converts. Thank you very much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our red chant books. Again, call everybody's attention to the donation boxes in the hallway. As always, we appreciate and depend on your generosity to help with these teachings. Thank you.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Shi Ho San Shi Shi Hu Shi Son Hu Sa Mo Ko Sa SokukoJi Horomi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.